Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Gochner, and this is Both Sides of the Aisle. I represent the political center, and I have today on the left, Shireen Gurbani.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for tuning into this very important episode.
Yeah, we got a special program today. John is not with us, and we have Tim Hawks with us, who is the chairman of the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. He's a former member of the Utah House of Representatives, advisor to policy leaders, an attorney by trade, and he is one of the three, Shireen, most knowledgeable people on Great Salt Lake that I know.
Okay, this I'm thrilled about because I do have moments of existential dread about the lake. So thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, we love having you, Tim. Tell us a little bit more about your background, just to give our listeners a little bit flair. Because when I first met Tim, I just knew him as one of the most thoughtful legislators, that was in the body, and you just knew that anything he was working on was going to be data-driven, really, policy sophisticated.
How interesting.
That's my experience with you.
Well, thanks, Natalie. I appreciate that. I tried to be that way when I was serving. I'm a recovering lawyer and a recovering now politician, but my background is in law, and then I was at a big firm in Washington, D.C., did a total Green Acres move and decided I wanted to work on the natural environment, really. I went to work for Trout Unlimited, an NGO working on water law and policy. So I moved back from Washington, D.C. here to Utah. And then about 10 years ago, I moved over to the brine shrimp industry. And so I find that for the last 10 years, much of my day job is really focused on protecting this really vital resource. So that's what got me engaged. And because our legislature is a part-time legislature, if you have any sort of subject matter expertise, you tend to drift into that space. So for years, I was kind of the water guy, and then I
because of your ecology kind of background.
Yeah.
Did you practice water law or what?
No, I practiced general, appellate, constitutional, that kind of stuff. So it was totally. I didn't even take an environmental law class in law school, but it was. Trout was an interesting fit for me because I like to fish. I like to spend time outside.
Yeah.
But that really allowed me to cut my teeth really in making policy, because I started working immediately on in-stream flow, which is basically water rights for the environment. And I didn't really know what I was stepping into at the time, but that's just really carried forward. And then it was fun to be, as a policymaker, in the legislature at a time when Great Salt Lake really took on a lot higher profile.
Yeah.
And so we were able to do an enormous amount in a very short period of time.
Did you grow up near water?
I think all of us, to one degree or another, again, born in Brigham, and here in Utah, these little streams and rivers are kind of the lifeblood of the West. But then I've always just been in and around water. I like to.
Natalie, did you grow up near water?
Oh, Sugar House Park?
Yeah. Okay.
Why not? I grew up in the Sugar House East Mill Creek area.
Yeah. So I grew
all
up
of
on
the canyon streams and
a stream so I grew up just south of Bismarck, North Dakota, like just outside of city limits. And the little creek, Apple Creek, was a feeder into the Missouri River. And those converged probably a mile from my house. And so a lot of my time was spent on this sort of big waterway, the Missouri River, which is cold and muddy and fast moving. And then this creek where I spent genuinely hours of my childhood. So I have a lot of really fond and loving memories about water, but my relationship to water here is really different. I feel lucky that I live in downtown. I'm close to City Creek, so I get to spend almost every day. I walk through that and see that little stream.
Yeah.
But I am really terrified about what's happening with our lake here.
So let's unpack it. But Shireen, I got to think. So I know Tim quite well. We've worked on a lot of things jointly. And I got a whole bunch of questions to ask him about unpacking. But I want you to go ahead and go for it a little bit. Because
I can't wait.
I bet you'll love this because he's an expert. So go for it.
Well,
and I'll jump in.
I just want to start with your sort of orientation to politics. What made you ever decide to run for the legislature?
Well, my wife, to be precise, I was one of these kids that grew up. I wanted to be involved in politics. I was interested in speech and debate. I was one of those kind of nerds growing up.
Same.
But then I went through a period really in college where I became very disaffected with politics, sort of ends justifies the means mentality. And so I drifted away from it, and I didn't think that was going to be my thing. And then I drifted back into it because Dan Lillienquist, who was a state senator at the time.
Another really thoughtful policymaker, by the way.
Yeah. Dan Lillienquist said, hey, I'm thinking about running for the Senate, so I'm going to resign my state Senate seat. You ought to think about running. And I just wrote it off. I thought, no, it's not something I'm really that interested in doing. Fast forward 6 months when he actually left his seat, resigned his seat, and it was my wife that said, I know how much you love policy. I know how much energy you get in this space. You really want to close that door? And that sent me really thinking long and hard about do I want to do this? So I actually ran for that seat, lost, and then turned around 2 years later and ran for the House and won.
And what were you hoping to affect in terms of policy change and what year was that? And what were you hoping to do?
Well, I think there are some of us that are just kind of ideologues, I guess. Not ideologue, idealist is really the word. We might be both at the same time. But idealist in the sense of want to make a positive impact in the world. And policy offers a unique way to do that.
I agree.
And to sort of leave things, you hope better than you found them. And so that was my motivation, and it wasn't any particular direction. It wasn't that I wanted to get involved in water law and policy or anything like that. I just had those expertise, and I brought them to the table. And so when I was a legislator, I wound up doing a lot in the natural resource space.
I'll just add in here that this is what makes a part-time legislature so wonderful, is people with Tim's interests can have an expertise and then bring it in.
Yeah.
And if they're committed to the good of the whole, then you get really great outcomes, which I would say that this is a legislator who did that.
So this was mid-2000s or later?
So I first ran in 2012, and then I ran and won in 2014, so started serving in 2015.
Okay, interesting. And then I guess maybe this is too existential and large, but should I be worried that we're not going to solve the lake?
Well, I think that what I would say is there is very good reason to be concerned about Great Salt Lake, but also very good reason to be hopeful about the future.
Well,
so
I'm
it's
interested.
not time to panic. It is time to be concerned.
What outline the concerns?
Well, the concerns are that the threat is real. So if you look globally at these terminal lake systems, and you can kind of just think about it, it takes all the water in a watershed and it concentrates it down, and it brings all the sediments and minerals and everything in that watershed and it concentrates it. So if that lake goes away, then those really fine sediments, they get released. And so everywhere we've lost a terminal lake, whether that's the Aral Sea in Central Asia or Lake Urmia in Iran or Owens Lake in California, the effects on local air quality have been catastrophic. And so it's air quality, but it tends to be economic if there's any sort of human settlement nearby, obviously environmental. So there's just a whole lot of knock-on effects that happen, and those are real.
So Shireen's face is she's getting scared. She's not turning
worse.
green.
Okay, well,
But it's pretty interesting because he went right to the human health.
Yes, which is my
you weren't
most
going to the
concerning
birds. You were going to human health.
Well, and that's what I would say. Listen, the Great Salt Lake is hemispherically important for birds, but the reality is most people aren't going to change everything about their life and what they're doing and based on concern about birds.
Yeah.
But when you talk about Great Salt Lake, I say it touches the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. So it touches things that are really critical to us. You may not care about birds in the abstract. Most people care very much about the air that they and their family breathe. Are they going to have enough water, right, to drink and all that sort of stuff? So it touches us in a really these fundamental human needs. And that those concerns, I would say, are real. So a lot of people, I get skepticism on the right sometimes from people that say, I don't really think this is a problem. I think this is manufactured. It kind of has a ring of like the climate crisis or whatever. Yeah. And so because of that, they'll say, I just don't really believe it. And what I tell them is, look, this is not looking into a crystal ball. We're not trying to predict something here. We know how this story ends because we've seen this script play out again and again and again.
Yeah.
Now, there's a critical difference.
Okay, I hope this is the hopeful part. Please tell me.
This is the hopeful part, which is our lake, well, it's not in the place that we want it to be, is still performing most of its what we would call beneficial uses. So Utah's air quality on average remains pretty good. We have dust events. We don't want to have those dust events.
Fire like we're having.
But
now.
it's not horrible.
Yeah.
It's not worth leaving the state over or anything like that. And the ecosystem out there, because of actions the state has taken and because it's a resilient ecosystem, it's functioning really well. Yeah. And so number one, we haven't lost our lake. And number two is we are in the unique position of being able to save it.
Yeah.
And we say that a lot. We're the only ones that can maybe showcase how to save a terminal lake. But that's not hype. That's real.
Yeah.
Well, and I know some about this, but part of why it's real, Shireen, and you can disagree with me, Tim, if you want, but we've run scenarios and we know a lot about this lake. The hydrologists at the University of Utah will point out to me that we have over 100 years of history on this lake. Who has that? And then we're able to take all that 100 years of variation in temperature and stream flow and, I don't know, whatever
population growth.
Yeah, whatever you want to
modeling.
look at.
Yeah.
And we can run scenarios and we can say with that variability, what are the chances that, with these actions, if we get this much more water to the lake, that we have a healthy lake by this date? And we've shown that it's possible. We're still in the funnel of being able to save the lake.
Yeah, not only possible, but I would say probable if we tap the very best of what it means to be Utah. I mean, I'm proud of Utah. I know this is Utah exceptionalism. We think we're better and smarter or whatever. But one thing that we seem to do really well in Utah is to work together. And Great Salt Lake requires that. All of us contributed to lake declines. It's going to take all of us working together to bring it back. But I'm confident that if we tap the best of what it means to be a Utahn, and the best of that really strength of community,
right,
that we absolutely can do it. We're already seeing some really positive signs.
So in our second segment, let's do a lightning round of a bunch of these specifics: salinity, Phragmites, engineered
interested.
solutions. Do you want to do that?
And also what our listeners can do. I know there's individual action they can take, but they can also reach out to their representatives in legislatures. They'd love to talk about that too.
Good. Okay, let's take a short break. It's Natalie Gochner with Shireen Gorbani and Tim Hawks. Stay tuned. You're listening to Both Sides of the Aisle on UPR. We love to hear from listeners like you. If you would like to send us a comment, email bsotapodcast@gmail.com. That's bsotapodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.
Shireen Gorbani on the left.
Natalie Gochner in the Political Center. This is Both Sides of the Aisle, and we have a special guest here today talking about Great Salt Lake. Tim Hawks, he's the chairman of the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council and one of the three most knowledgeable people in the state about Great Salt Lake. That's my terminology,
maybe too kind.
Tim.
But I'll hold down the political right for what it's worth. Conservative Republican working on environmental issues.
That's great. So we want to do a little bit of a lightning round about the lake. Tell me, I'm just going to hit you with some questions, and Shireen will jump in and do color commentary. What's the deal with salinity? Why does salinity matter?
Well, salinity really affects the ecosystem out there in the lake, and it's not a complex ecosystem. It's sort of brine shrimp, brine flies, and then tens of millions of migratory birds that rely on them. And I think the good news is because of the actions, the sort of historical accident, and that's that the lake is cut not in half, but kind of in half by a railway causeway, and there's holes in that causeway, and there's ability to manage the flow of water, and with its salt between those openings in the causeway, we can manage for salinity. And the truth is today, even though we're at really low levels, the salinity is in really healthy range.
Because of the mixing of the north and south arms.
Quite frankly, because we're able to export salt from the south to the north. And what that means is that that ecosystem, even at these low levels, and that's the brine shrimp and the brine flies and the millions of migratory birds that rely on it, are also in a relatively good position given where we're at.
So I always think about Dr. Bonnie Baxter and how I feel like when I started hearing her talk about the Great Salt Lake, a decade ago, it felt like she was Cassandra, like just basically telling these truths, and people.
She's amazing, for sure.
People weren't listening. Do you feel like at this point we have been able to, as political actors trying to work on policy, as researchers, do you feel like we're at a point now where we're like all expertise in the room, all hands on deck, or do you feel like there's still opportunity for us to really pull together? Because to me, I see artists, I see all sorts of people trying to figure out what they could do to participate in elevating the concern around the lake. Do you feel like our leaders, our political leaders are saying, I'm not saying they have to invite every poet over, but I do think the researchers, the scientists, do you feel like it's really all hands on deck and all voices listened to?
Well, I think that's the great thing, and that's one of the things that gives me hope is we have engaged, the state has engaged, the state is working together in really good ways. Salinity is just one dimension that we can point to, maybe the single most important thing that the state has done. And that's not just if you care about birds, by the way, because if you don't care about birds, sometimes you can get endangered species problems that come back around. The vast majority of eared grebes, for example, and Wilson's phalarope, they rely heavily on that. And so if we were to lose the ecology of Gilbert Bay, suddenly your ability to control your own water destiny, your future, your ability to control water rights
species get listed.
Yeah.
And so there are any number of reasons we want to care about it. But again, salinity is a great way. But, listen, to your point, to your question, the strike team, Natalie and I work together on the strike team. That's a great illustration of academic and some industry representatives, some other people coming together to really help answer some of these critical questions about the lake.
Yeah, I love that.
Teach our listeners about Phragmites.
Phragmites. So it has this horrible name, but this is this very tall grass you see literally everywhere around Utah Lake and Great Salt Lake. It is an invasive. There is a native type of Phragmite, but the one that you see a lot is an invasive from Europe. It uses a ton of water. It grows really, really tall, and really it disrupts these natural ecosystems. It uses a lot of water, and so it's a problem.
Yeah, and that's a pH. If people Phragmite, if you're interested in looking it up and learning more about it, is there something people can do about it?
Individually, not so much that you can do as an individual basis. Yeah. If they're growing in your yard, you're putting way too much water on your yard.
But the state is actively shredding them, burning them, getting rid of these water consumptive, invasive species that hurt it.
Tell us about air temperature. I mean, this feels like an area where, when I think about some of the concerns people are raising, from data centers to just a changing climate, how does air temperature play into what's happening with the lake?
Well, I would say, that's another reason to be concerned. Any big body of water helps moderate temperatures, keeps it cooler in the summer and keeps it warmer in the winter because it holds some of that thermal mass. And so the lake helps moderate temperature. So that's not something we want to lose as far as that goes. Now, I will say sometimes people are like, the reason I need to have my lawn is to keep the atmosphere cool. That's actually a poorly considered notion. You're much better off to go with trees.
I was just in Oregon for a friend's birthday party. She spent a lot of time living near Lake Tahoe. We had a competition to see who could guess the depth of Lake Tahoe, which is like something amazing to me, like 16,000 some feet. Does that sound right? Anyway, so the average, 1,600. Correct, 1,652. The actual average depth of the Great Salt Lake, do you know it?
It's about 3 feet.
Yeah.
Just
to put that in perspective.
Yeah, I've been on tours of the lake where I'm looking to put on, the life preservers, and they're like, you don't need them.
Just stand up. Yeah. So it's about, I think at the deepest, somewhere between 10 and 16, depending on water.
Yeah, depending on lake elevations, it go up to 20, 25, but in most places it's quite shallow. It might be knee to ankle deep for just miles upon miles.
Incredible.
So I'm familiar with the economic impacts of the lake. You've got mineral extraction, you've got recreation benefits, you've got aquaculture, you've got the ski industry. Why is the lake so important to the ski industry?
Well, really for two reasons. One is that we have what's called lake effect snow. And so if you go along the Wasatch Front, the numbers, it's like 6% to 8%, something like that. The cottonwoods, though, in particular, maybe up to 10% of the snowpack is tied directly to Great Salt Lake. The water is effectively cycled.
We love it, right, as a skier.
We love it.
We just get dumped on with the best snow on earth.
But if the lake goes down, it's a double whammy because, one, you lose that dynamic, and two, the dust blows onto the snow and causes it to melt quicker.
Yeah.
So it's a 1-2 punch. It's really, really bad. But interestingly enough, when the ski industry approached me a few years ago, I thought they were going to be concerned about snow, but they were concerned about employee recruitment and retention.
Interesting.
Because they were saying some of our employees are asking, is there a future for me here in Utah?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. Are you a skier?
A little bit.
Okay, me too.
I would love to hear you talk about agriculture in the lake. And a lot of our listeners are in the Cache Valley. It's a breadbasket of our state.
For sure.
And I know that one of the most cost-effective ways we can help the lake is to help with ag optimization and also, water leases of ag water. Give us the skinny on that.
Well, because agriculture uses a lot of the water in the state of Utah and in the Great Salt Lake Basin, the less than most people think. Increasingly, it's what we do in homes and businesses.
Population growth, yeah.
But agriculture for sure plays a major role. And so any realistic solution for Great Salt Lake must involve agriculture. I think the key thing to keep in mind is you'll hear people criticize crop choices and things like that. I'm not going to conserve because farmers are growing alfalfa and shipping it to China. And I think there's a misunderstanding there. We don't tell people like how to build, what their house should look like. We don't tell businesses what product to make. We don't tell farmers what crops to grow. What we can do is create systems that give farmers meaningful opportunities to conserve water, and not in a way that helps rather than hurts their bottom line. And so for me, it's always been about, can we create market-based voluntary programs that help agriculture producers to share their water, often on a temporary basis. And if we build the right system, then agriculture is they're not the obstacle. They're not a problem. They're a part of the solution. And from an agricultural perspective, if we give agricultural producers more tools to hold on to their water, more tools to remain on the land and to continue producing, if that's what they want to do, well, that's really truly a win-win. And I think that's the goal.
Yeah, I think that's right. I grew up in I feel like much more agricultural state than this one. I'm from North Dakota. And the amount of people who would be looking for any support to be able to stay in that industry is real. It is not easy to be a farmer in this country. It's not easy to be a farmer in this state, I think, in particular. So I do really see ag as being a central part of, or partners, willing partners in trying to find solutions. But I do think it's getting harder and harder to hold on to that lifestyle.
We got about 5 minutes left in the program. Let's talk about the solutions. What do we do next? We have a Office of the Great Salt Lake Commissioner. This is the person who wakes up every morning and goes to bed every night thinking about the future of Great Salt Lake and our economy and our health and whatnot. What's the plan? Do we have a plan, Tim?
We do have a plan, and I think we're in the process of implementing the plan. And so a lot of the things that we need to do are being done, and I think that's the good news.
Yeah.
And
changing water law.
Yeah, we have
spending money for ag optimization, going to secondary water metering.
Utah has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in agriculture water optimization, so that's investing in water-wise technologies. We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in secondary metering, which enable users to know how much they're using so that they can use less. It's a critical conservation tool. And so all of these things are investments that the state has made, but we got to continue to move forward. And there's some things that we have to do that we're not doing a really good job of. If you look at the amount of what I call non-functional turf, so that's grass we don't use it except to mow it, right? If the definition I like to say is if the only reason you step on grass is to mow it, that's non-functional turf. I think about 90% of our turf probably meets that definition. So we're not talking about parks. We're not talking about golf courses. We're talking about
soccer fields.
Yeah, we're not talking about soccer fields. We're talking about the grass that is just there because it's eye candy. And that, if you add that up, that's 135 square miles of Kentucky bluegrass. It uses an enormous amount of water. And quite frankly, it's a luxury that we can't afford in a desert. So we need to find ways to use less turf. And you can have great landscapes with trees and bushes. Just put them on a drip system, right?
Yeah.
This is really, really key. People ask what's the single most important thing they can do, and it's easy. Use less water outside. It's not so much your toilet, your showers, things like that. As far as the Great Salt Lake is concerned, because that water goes back to the lake, but it's the water outside. And so as much as you can, convert to drip, convert to water-wise plant, use only the minimal amount of grass necessary for whatever your needs are. If you got grandkids, they need a little play space, that's fine. Water it according to the guidelines. So much of it is overwatered dramatically.
What's the thoughts on engineering solutions? I'm talking about bringing water from the Pacific Ocean, getting more water from Idaho or even from the Colorado River. We sometimes call those engineered solutions. How about new berms or different things that manage where the water goes differently? Give us the quick rundown on that.
I'd say all options need to be on the table, leave no stone unturned. I will say that the best solutions are the ones that we can control, that are within our control. And how much water we use outside our homes is within our control.
Yeah.
Helping ag have programs that work is within our control. But a lot of these other things require actors that are well outside our control. If you could do a pipeline from Idaho, could you get what is Idaho's incentive to send water to Utah?
Right.
These are real problems and challenges that would need to be overcome.
I think something that I'm concerned about is that people feel like either maybe they have representation that really cares or people that are never going to respond to it. And I just would suggest that at your municipal level, your county level, at your state level, it is important if you care about this, if you have ever thought with dread about the lake, that you should reach out to your representatives and really ask them, are you engaged on this? What are you doing? Do you find that people are receptive? As a legislator, were you receptive to those kinds of messages?
Absolutely, as long as people reach out in a respectful way and don't just demand, that you shut down, all the farmers
Every
or something
golf
like
course.
that. Yeah. I think if you reach out in a respectful way and you say, this is really of concern to me.
I want to know what you're doing.
Yeah, I want to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
The public is engaging, and that is helping drive change. So we're seeing a lot of change.
Is there something the average public can do to help you in this role?
Well, I'd say go back to asking yourself, what can I do to help? And that goes back to how we use water. And the biggest single thing you can do is use less water outside.
Tim, we've got 30 seconds in the program. What are the odds, do you think, that Olympic opening ceremony, evening that NBC or whoever's holding the rights does a nice report on how we save the lake. What are the odds of that?
I'm bullish. I'm optimistic. I think we can get there. I don't think the lake's going to be exactly where we want it by 2034, but I think there's going to be enough positive momentum that we can point to, that we can all give ourselves a pat on the back because...
Okay. Shereen, are you going to sleep better tonight?
No, but I do appreciate the optimism.
Come on. Are you really not? Because I listen to Tim and I just feel so good.
We're recording this in the backdrop of just like unbelievable fire kicking off really early, and it just feels really like a tenuous time. But I appreciate your attitude, and I'm with you in heart.
That's a wrap. Natalie Gochner with Shireen Gorbani. Our guest has been Tim Hawks. Anthony Scoma produces the program. Thanks for listening.